Maelstrom, the Night City gang renowned for their intense cyberware, multiple bright red eyes, and vicious murderous nature, who base themselves within their own neon metal club of the Totentans. This gang might seem like your regular anarchistic cyber thugs, but their history is a bit more complex than that. So in today's episode, we will explore these terrifying psychos who roam the Neon City and how they got to where they are in 2077. This is the story behind Cyberpunk's gang, known as Maelstrom. But before we dive into Maelstrom's history, let's also dive into the net and explore today's sponsor, Opera GX, and their latest Cyberpunk 2077 mod. Mods are here for Opera GX, and they are a fantastic way to make your web browser stand out and feel personal to you, and this specific mod shown today will make you feel like you're browsing the web in 2077. This official Cyberpunk 2077 mod will not only make your browser look and sound like the world and technology of Cyberpunk, but it also comes with a portal which gives you regular updates on the latest news about the game, exclusive content, build guides made by CG Projekt Red, an interactive build experimenter, cosplay guides for the characters, a full interactive world map of Night City, and even a full game booklet which gives you an absolute ton of information about the game world, behind the making of it with the developers, tips and tricks for new players, and so much more. One of my personal favourite features is the music and additional sounds that are added to the browser, so when you open a tab and start typing, it sounds like a proper Cyberpunk personal terminal. Having the music mod is also great as it gives you that real immersion into the world, especially great for when I'm writing scripts like this or planning a tabletop game session. Browsing can sometimes be a chore, but with the official Cyberpunk 2077 mod on Opera GX, there is just more to do, and it's great to really add some customization to your overall experience. Having a map I can constantly open is so helpful for if I ever need to locate somewhere for a video, like the Totentans for this Maelstrom one for example. So why not get rid of that bland relic of a browser and upgrade to Opera GX with the Cyberpunk mod and feel like you are using the net of 2077 using the link below. If you're a mega Cyberpunk fan, this is the browser for you. So sync up your personal link and get browsing with the official Cyberpunk mod for Opera GX today. A massive thank you to Opera GX for sponsoring this video, and with that said, let's get back into the story behind Maelstrom. The story of Maelstrom starts with another gang that set themselves up within the year of 2010. That was the gang known as the Metal Warriors. Unfortunately, not much is known about these gang members, but what is known is that they were a group that set themselves up around a somewhat warrior code. This code would mean they would do such things as elaborate combat rituals, have unique ranks and a clear hierarchy, and they would all wear unique looking armor to help them stand out in battle. It would be extremely clear if you came into contact with the Metal Warriors, as they would have their own iconic look and would be deadly in battle because of how they structured themselves. As this group went around Night City, they would be labelled as a combat gang, essentially meaning that if they had a problem with someone, say they insulted the Metal Warriors, stole from their territory, or looked at them funny, the gang would go out of their way to gear up, perform their rituals, and declare full-on war against you. And they wouldn't stop until you had been wiped off of the planet. If you were in a gang and the Metal Warriors declared war against you, you'd be stuck in a brutal, bloody gang war that could have lasted years. And to be honest, the Metal Warriors were renowned for picking fights with pretty much every gang they came into contact with. It wouldn't matter if they had the biggest weapons and vehicles or were 100 times bigger than them, the Warriors would fight them to prove their worth, and it was that made them stand out so much. One warrior, however, named only as Hammer, had objections to the way things were done and did actions that went against the gang's warrior code. Because of that, he was kicked out of the Metal Warriors. Soon after Hammer leaving, the Metal Warriors would find themselves in a massive battle against a cult known as the Inquisitors, who were set up solely to fight back against all forms of cyberware, and because of that, the Metal Warriors, who were adorned with it, were a prime target. During this war, the Inquisitors would be able to overwhelm the Metal Warriors and would go on to pretty much wipe them out, with the remaining members having to flee and seek out new opportunities. As a result of this total wipeout of the Warriors, the remnants of it would go and join Hammer once again, as a new gang would be set up. That, of course, being Maelstrom, a name that was chosen to resemble a powerful, violent whirlpool that sucks takes in anything around it and destroys it. As this gang was in its early stages, it would also acquire members from the poser gang known as the Red Chrome Legion, who used cyberware to look extremely intimidating and also held extreme neo-fascist ideologies, as well as the gang known as Iron Sights, who were a booster and combat gang who also used cyberware to bolster their arsenal. All of these gang members who now marched under the banner of Maelstrom, which was a clenched fist around the handle of an old-style hammer surrounded by a whirlwind, they all had one thing in common, and that was their utter hatred for the Inquisitors, who tried to take them out multiple times over the years. Together, these individuals would all look similar, looking extremely dirty, primitive, and utterly terrifying and dangerous, wearing traditional black leather with chrome chains like that of a hardcore metal biker gang, and to top it all off, would make their cyberware extremely visible to all. With Hammer as their leader, this version of Maelstrom would not have any codes to live by. They wouldn't have any rules either. They had total freedom and were allowed to express themselves as they see fit. There was a problem with this gang, however, and that was the fact that because they loved to coat themselves in as much cyberware as possible, 1/3 of them were officially registered as cyber psychos, with the other 2/3 of them being pretty much on the edge, and one little thing could have set them off. This meant that even walking near one of their hideouts would mean you'd most likely be killed by them for no reason other than them wanting to kill someone. The only way you wouldn't be killed where you stood would be if an Inquisitor was right behind you, and that would lead all of the Maelstrom members away from you into immediately attacking the Inquisitor. In 2010, the gang finally set themselves up in their own headquarters that they could call their home. This was based out within the old downtown in an abandoned department store close to the docks known as Barley's. This whole area which surrounded the store was theirs, but it wasn't as simple as them just sitting here having a fun time. The other buildings around the area were owned by corporations and successful solos who would keep an eye on this gang at all times to make sure they don't get up to trouble. Despite being cyber psychos and wanting to cause problems all of the time, the Maelstrom members weren't stupid at all and knew that if they were to full-on attack these buildings or people head-on, they would feel the full force of their corporate troops or the solos themselves, which would not work out well for them. They did, however, pick their targets extremely well, knowing that they could get away with occasional murders. But there were 3 people they didn't target during this time, and no one knows why they weren't ever even considered to be taken out. Those being the 3 elderly ladies who ran a small, completely unguarded flower shop near their headquarters. By 2020, the Maelstrom gang quietened down a little bit, but they would still go out of their way to hunt down the Inquisitors at night. But their jobs would be much smaller in scale, as they would commit small-time crimes as well as protection rackets. But during this era, it became a focus for the gang members to upgrade their cyberware to be more effective, and they also wanted to get new, more substantial combat drugs. And with the jobs they were doing, it wasn't enough to get them what they wanted. Knowing they needed more money, the gang members assaulted the businesses near them, starting with the Mexican restaurant run by 2 ex-CIA agents known as Guevara. This restaurant had a secret business on the side, however, and that was dealing weapons down the back alley next to them. Thinking this would be a quick, easy job that would get them loads of money to spend on whatever they wanted, the gang would be completely wrong, as this whole assault would turn into an utter bloodbath, as these cyber psychos would come face to face with extremely well kitted out professionals. Despite this pretty terrible decision to take on the professionals at Guevara, Maelstrom would also go into a new line of work, where they would capture miscreants and launder them by using the good old-fashioned discipline of throwing them off the rooftop at Tong laundries. As 2023 rolled around and the 4th Corporate War came to its conclusion with the Night City Holocaust, the Maelstrom gang would actually be saved thanks to where the HQ was located, with their building being protected from the blast thanks to the Bayview condos, which completely shielded them. However, those members who were heavily chromed up were the ones to pay the price, as they would all be taken out due to a weird unexplained EMP-induced frenzy of hyper-violence which happened directly after the blast went off. This weird state would go on to affect Hammer, leaving the gang completely leaderless. The problems didn't stop there. Despite the blast not taking them out, massive raging fires would sweep through the area, wiping out everything in their path, which included multiple Maelstrom members who would be burnt alive. For those who did survive all of the carnage happening in the city, they would be appointed with a new leader named Crusher, who would rally together all of the survivors and get them to fight through all of the burning city to find new headquarters for them to set up within. Finally, they would find a new place that they would set up as the Totentanz Club, which would be located in an abandoned hotel of the Burleson Tower, located within central Night City. Before they could set up here, however, the gang members would find that another gang had tried setting up here as well, a gang named the Warrior Heart, a combat gang who were once located within South Night City. Realizing something needed to be done about this, and quickly, Crusher would go on to personally kill the gang's leader, leading to the rest of Maelstrom to wipe out the Warrior Heart gang, making them defunct once and for all. With them gone, Maelstrom fixed up the whole tower and made it their new base of operations, locating themselves within the middle floors of the hotel. With that all done, they would go back to where their last HQ was to remove the charred corpses of their fallen brothers and sisters, as well as the body of Hammer, and once they were removed, they would be taken back to their new headquarters in the hotel and put all of the bodies up on the walls of the ballroom, which they used as a court. To them, putting these bodies up was a sign of respect. It was seen as a mark of honor to wear the old chrome of their fallen members. For the next few years, the members of Maelstrom would go on to continue fixing their tower, and with that, they would also go on to open it up once again for others to go to. On top of that, the gang would also go around repelling looters, end-of-the-world types, and even soldiers from various sides. With that, they would also try and rebuild their gang, getting in more members from other gangs who were looking for a safe home after losing everything during the Holocaust. One standout member who joined Maelstrom was a boy known as Warlock, who joined them during the chaos of the smouldering city. On top of all of that, Maelstrom would also go on to start a long-running feud with smaller gangs of cyber psychos, taking on board some of their philosophies when it came to cyberware, which once again led to many of the Maelstrom gang members to upgrade their cyberware, making it become more visible and deadly. With their increase in power during this time, Maelstrom's constant conflict with the Inquisitors got more and more heated and bloody, with an intense amount of fights happening all over the city. Crusher was a fantastic leader for Maelstrom during this era, as he would lead his gang into battle, fighting against all who went against their way, wiping out all of their enemies and absorbing those gangs they had wiped out. But with that all said, something had broken within Crusher, and he wasn't the same since before the city burnt. Something was missing, and despite everything he had done for his gang, Crusher wasn't there mentally anymore, and within the year 2027, he would go into a cyber-psychotic episode, venturing out and slaughtering a Stormtech convoy that was renowned for making computing hardware and cyberware, and after that, disappeared into the center of the city, into the hot zone. With Crusher gone, Maelstrom was once again leaderless, and when a new one was picked, a woman known as Hextra, they would enter into a new era as the 2030s and 2040s would begin. Unfortunately for Hextra, when the gang entered the 2030s, she would be killed almost immediately, being taken out by MaxTac forces, a group of special military-grade officers who would track down and take out any reported cyber psychos in the city. Despite that, Maelstrom's influence grew massively, especially within the hot zone and Central Night City, and as a result, a new leader was selected, that being the young gun of Warlock, who had learned everything he knew from both Crusher and Hextra. Warlock knew he needed to make a mark instantly and brought Maelstrom together as a real force, sending out all of the wannabes who hung around their headquarters into the hot zone to become the best scavenger force within there. These wannabes were so determined to stand out, they would risk going into this area and getting cancer or mutations from the radiation just for an opportunity to become a Maelstrom member, or at least gain some unique and shiny chrome. Their efforts in salvaging from the hot zone passed around the city so much that eventually Warlock was able to even send out other rival gang members to salvage the zone for them, giving them a little cut of what they found. On top of that, Warlock also allowed these gangs to occupy Totentans, especially other booster gangs who enjoyed chroming up as much as they did, but Maelstrom was still the top dogs and were in charge of the whole building and were recognized as such, as they were the ones who were keeping it standing, constantly rebuilding the parts that were falling apart. But Warlock wasn't alone in this. In fact, he had a team of lieutenants that would help him on his overall goals. One of them, known only as Quake, had an extremely brutal way of dealing with things, despite the fact that his image of black leathers and red lit cyberware inspired so many new recruits to take up that same image. Another lieutenant known as Flenser would look into the skill of net running and would try and encourage the other members of the gang to dive into it and also learn the skills. There was too much valuable stuff inside the net for them to completely ignore. Finally, there were two other valuable members, with the first being known as Joe Pitt, who was responsible for watching over the headquarters and its overall structure, along with the weaponry housed there, as well as their armor armor and their other equipment. There was also Ripper, who organized all of the scavenger parties and the efforts going on out within the hot zone. By the 2040s, Warlock's Maelstrom grew even further and was one of the most powerful gangs out there, as they not only had their scavenging operations going on in the hot zone, but they also had a massive drug and cybernetic business going on throughout the whole city. Warlock had brought together some of the smartest minds possible, as well as the toughest individuals, to make sure their whole operation ran smoothly and efficiently without anyone trying to stop them in the process. If anyone were to attack them to steal their products and resources, Warlock would send forward the rank and file troops to wreck their competitors and people trying to take from them. Despite having this real anarchistic look where they would oppose anyone that was corporate or did things the proper way, Warlock actually did not care too much and did business with anyone he could, from corporate agents to even rival gangs if they were serious about trade. With that said, Warlock wanted to make sure Maelstrom had a chaotic image to anyone on the outside. He wanted to make it look like they had no real agenda and liked to just be aggressive and impulsive, as it drew away attention from their real, extremely methodical operations going on within the tower. Here they would go around conducting acts of ultra violence, as well as setting up creepy rituals which were originally coined by Ripper and Quake. However, it's gotten to the point in 2040 where some of the lesser members truly believe that these rituals are part of a much larger religious or spiritual or even warrior belief that is part of the Maelstrom way. Realistically, it's just to scare away outsiders. By this point, Maelstrom's operations within the hot zone were a major success, as they were able to salvage valuable equipment from guns to hardware and, most importantly, powerful cyberware. This all allowed them to kit themselves out to be majorly effective in combat, but also to help turn their drug trade into a major drug trafficking network, which also dealt in high-value weapon trading. With so much cyberware salvaged, they were also able to do dealings with many Ripper docks throughout all of Night City, which helped them trade salvage for majorly discounted services. Despite all of this, Warlock had much bigger long-term ambitions for his gang. For starters, he wanted an actual headquarters building for them that wasn't just an old falling apart building that required fixing all of the time. And on top of that, he wanted to make sure Maelstrom was the top dog in the city's underworld and would stop at nothing to make sure that happened. With those plans slowly building, the Maelstrom members were still able to have some downtime where they would take time out of dealing drugs and weapons and relax by hunting down some inquisitors who they still hated with an absolute passion, and of course, vice versa. On the 23rd of January 2044, Ripper launched an attack on a group of squatters who were living in the remnants of the old Brookhaven co-op apartments, where they would be brutally massacred by the gang members sent there. However, these squatters weren't just nobodies. Instead, they were groups of war veterans and peripherals to them. These people weren't directly linked to the nearby bar known as the Forlorn Hope, but these squatters were somewhat protected by them, as the staff members there, who were mostly solos themselves, went into the apartments to help them out and drive back the Maelstrom members who were attacking them in the process. As the bar workers went into the apartments to fend off the gang members, they would be able to hold them off enough to allow the squatters to get everything they needed packed and then leave the building, having help from the nomad clan known as the Jodes, who would help them leave town for good. One of these squatters who stayed behind was known as Valence, who was rescued by the members of the Forlorn Hope, who took him in as one as their own now. Losing this battle against the solos, Ripper was infuriated, and even more with this act of kindness of taking in the street kid of Valence. Essentially, Ripper would hunt down these vulnerable people who had lost everything and was using them to go into the hot zone and hunt for salvage, knowing they couldn't really say no. But with the Forlorn Hope stepping in, his operation could not work the way he wanted, and he had to go back to the drawing board. By 2045, the Burleson Tower was on its last legs, and it was clear it was going to collapse at any moment, and if it did, it would crush all of the Maelstrom members it had housed within it, as well as their many guests. Warlock knew he had to take action, and fast, and tasked Flenser with going out with her people and finding a new place for their gang. Flenser already had a list of places that would be worth checking out, probably making a note of them, as she knew Warlock was always looking to relocate, and thought that the Watson development area would be the best place for them to check out. She was particular about what building she wanted. A hotel was her ultimate preference. Whilst Flenser was doing that, the rest of Maelstrom were looking to expand their drug and weapon trading businesses and ventured outside of the city centre and looked towards Old Japantown, making that their next target. But this was not a simple task, as this whole area was under the rule of another gang, the deadly members of the Tiger Claws, who did not take too kindly to the Maelstrom forces venturing into their area. Not only did the Maelstrom gang have the Tiger Claws to deal with, but they also had multiple extremely hostile scavver groups now hunting them down. This was all because they had become so desperate for salvage, as Maelstrom had ultimately taken over the whole of the hot zone, leaving nothing for them. Here they would hit them in various combat zones throughout the city, trying to grab anything from them possible. Warlock saw all of this going on around him and also kept an extremely close eye on his high-ranking officers, that being Ripper. The rumor was that Ripper was looking to break away from Maelstrom and start up his own rival gang who would take over that part of the hot zone. He would take it for themselves and force Warlock to come up with a new way of sending people in. Ripper knew the contacts, he organized all of the operations, all he had to do was cut Warlock from his world and he could be the king of the hot zone. But for a time this was just a rumor, and Warlock just had to be vigilant with his day-to-day operations. Luckily for him, however, Ripper's life would soon come to an end, as the new owners of the New Forlorn Hope went on to send out groups of mercenaries to hunt down Ripper and end him once and for all. The truth was, Ripper hadn't taken the attacks on the squatters too well. He hated what the Forlorn Hope had done with his little plan and sought out revenge on them by essentially burning down the whole of the Forlorn Hope bar in Little China. Unfortunately for him, whilst he did destroy the bar, the owners survived and sought out their own revenge for the burning down of their property, and with those mercenaries they were able to find him and sort things out once and for all. That said, Ripper had 3 people looking for him by the end of his life. Warlock would eventually discover that he was indeed intending to betray him and Maelstrom, and because of that, Warlock would have wanted to end his life as well. But there was also the cyberware corporation of Rocklin Augmentics, who were also seeking to kill Ripper for all of the damage he had done to their business over the years. In the end, no matter who did it, Ripper, the terrifying cyber psychotic monster that was a part of Maelstrom, was now dead, and the Forlorn Hope, Warlock, and Rocklin Augmentics could rest easy, knowing he could not do any further damage to them. With Ripper gone from their ranks, Maelstrom were able to continue their scavenging efforts despite losing their lead organizer. They would however have a new logistics center that would help them on their missions in the hot zone, and that would be based at the Ashcroft Hotel, which was located in the bank block of Central Night City. As for their main base, Maelstrom did eventually move from their crumbling tower and relocated the gang within an abandoned under construction hotel within the northern neighborhoods of the city, where they would store all of their possessions and re-establish the new Totentans. In the years leading up to 2077, a lot changed for Night City and for Maelstrom as a whole. It is not really stated what happened to the gang during that time, but Warlock would not be their leader anymore, and their numbers would decrease quite dramatically. This was probably because the hot zone was no more, as it was fully reconstructed into the new city centre and all undesirables were pushed out. But there was also the Unification War that kicked off, which caused many to leave the city and to also be killed by the NUSA forces. With this, the Maelstrom gang would also have to deal with Arasaka taking over a lot of the facilities up within the northern part of Watson, and would probably lose a lot of ground there as well. Because of this, the gang would also set up new operations to make some eddies, where they would perform hit jobs, executing their victims in a bizarre and brutal fashion. These victims are often found fully dismembered, skinned alive, as well as being drowned in wet concrete. They would also perform regular, well-planned heists on heavily guarded corporate transports. On top of that, they would also make a lot of eddies from their Totentans club, which became known as the most popular gangster club in Night City, where you could drink and riot all night, listening to neo-death metal music that the Maelstrom gang approved of, but it had to be approved of. It is said that if a night at this club has a body count less than a dozen, that specific night was seen as crappy and boring. At the start of 2077, they would be ruled by the new leader known as Brick, also known as Declan Griffin, who continued off from where Warlock had left them. Whilst they didn't have their salvaging business in the hot zone anymore, Maelstrom was still able to build on their drug empire and their trading of weapons and cyberware, even getting a hold of military spec equipment such as Militech drones and robots such as the Flathead, which they would steal from a Militech cargo utilizing the Militech insider who made deals with Brick. However, when this specific operation was going on, Brick would would be alerted by a fellow Maelstrom gang member known as Ophelia Patricia Sirawen that was another member of his gang that was trying to take him out, and with it would take over all of Maelstrom, labeling him as a feral animal. This gang member would be known as Royce, but Brick only scoffed at this claim, believing he was no threat to him at all. However, Royce would start antagonizing Brick, eventually leading to a standoff between the two within one of their bases within the All Foods plant. With tension rising between the two, Royce would eventually get the better of Brick, taking over all of his merchandise, including the Militech Flathead, and stored him in a back room, tied up in a chair with a proximity mine focused on him to make sure he wasn't going anywhere. Ellis Carter would be the last member of Maelstrom to personally back Brick's leadership. However, they were going to turn cyber psycho not long after Brick had been taken out, and because of it, the other Maelstrom members would grab him and forcibly remove a lot of his implants and would go on to further beat their face in. With Ellis out of the way, Royce would tell all of the other members that Brick was officially dead and he was now in charge of all of the gang. By the time V and Jackie Wells would go and meet with the Maelstrom gang to pick up their purchased flathead for the fixer of Dexter Deshawn, Royce's leadership was clear, and it was evident why he was seen as their powerful leader. But meeting these two up-and-coming mercs, there would be a choice to be made. V could decide to keep Royce in charge of their operations and leave them to it, or could kill him where he stood, allowing Patricia to take charge of the gang within the Totem Tans. Or if V were to save Brick when leaving the Maelstrom facility, he would take over control of the gang once again. Despite what happens with the Maelstrom leadership, they would continue to be an extremely dangerous and hostile force, taking out anyone who dared look at them in a funny way. Their chrome has only gotten bigger and better, still displaying their biker leathers, metal chains, and their bright red eyes or peripherals. Their logo has changed from their 2045 and 2020 days, and now is a cybernetic spider with a ton of cybernetic eyes and metal legs, giving off an image like they were a prototype horrifying creature that will scare anyone who dares witness them. Rituals are still a big thing within their society, with V witnessing one horrifying one where the member being at the center of the ritual diving into the net would go completely cyber psycho and kill her fellow members around her. With that, the cyber psycho known as Zaria Hughes would go into her icebox and await anyone who ventures into her lair. If you did find this icebox in the area, Zaria will be watching you the whole time as you stumble around looking for what had happened, until suddenly she would appear, blades on her arms trying to kill you just for the fun of it. If that image doesn't keep you up at night, then I don't know what will. But overall, Maelstrom are one of the biggest gangs in Night City, and one of the most brutal, terrifying and bloody gangs to have ever existed. Whilst their numbers are small now in 2077, or at least it appears to be, that doesn't mean they are a pushover, and it will take an extremely strong merc or rival gang to take them out. It's not sure where they will be in a few years, but considering they have survived through some of the toughest times and have profited massively through the horrors of war, there is no doubt that Maelstrom will continue to grow and succeed in their ambitions, and no matter how hard you hit them, they will always survive in some form. But until then, this has been the full history of the brutal gang of psychos known as Maelstrom. I want to say a massive thank you for watching this video, and do let me know if you have any other Cyberpunk videos you'd like to see in the comments below. Big thanks to my patrons for supporting me, including my small fishes, my big fishes Nox Vox and Ben Chance, my YouTube channel Wise Ones, Video Gamer 75 and Sith Lord 906, my sharks Wow OK, Alfred Carrere and Jason X117, my Megalodons Sinus and Hazy Thoughts, and my Starfish, the amazing new guy Nanohertz. Big thanks to Opera GX for sponsoring this video with their really cool Cyberpunk 2077 mod for the browser. If you love all things Cyberpunk, you have to check it out. It's just a nice addition to have on your browser. But with that said, that is all for now. Thank you again for watching, and I shall see you all in the next one. Cheers.